Hi, my sweet friends, and welcome back to Crochet Every Day with Judy. We are continuing reading The Adventures of Pinocchio, and today we're starting with Chapter 12. The showman, Fire Eater, makes Pinocchio a present of 5 gold pieces to take home to his father Geppetto, but Pinocchio instead allows himself to be taken in by the fox and the cat. The following day, Fire Eater called Pinocchio on one side and asked him, "What is your father's name?" "Geppetto." "And what trade does he follow?" "He is a beggar." "Does he gain much?" "Gain much? Why, he has never a penny in his pocket. Only think, to buy a spelling book for me to go to school, he was obliged to sell the only coat he had to wear, a coat that between patches and darns was not fit to be seen. Poor devil, I feel almost sorry for him. Here are 5 gold pieces. Go at once and take them to him with my compliments." You can easily understand that Pinocchio thanked the showman 1,000 times. He embraced all the puppets of the company one by one, even to the gendarmes, and beside himself with delight set out to return home. But he had not gone far when he met on the road a fox lame of one foot and a cat blind of both eyes, who were going along helping each other like good companions in misfortune. The fox who was lame walked leaning on the cat, and the cat who was blind was guided by the fox. "Good day, Pinocchio," said the fox, accosting him politely. "How do you come to know my name?" asked the puppet. "I know your father well." "Where did you see him?" "I saw him yesterday at the door of his house." "And what was he doing?" "He was in his shirt sleeves and shivering with cold." "Poor papa, but that is over. For the future he shall shiver no more." "Why?" "Because I am become a gentleman." "A gentleman, you," said the fox, and he began to laugh rudely and scornfully. The cat also began to laugh, but to conceal it she combed her whiskers with her forepaws. "There is little to laugh at," cried Pinocchio angrily. "I am really sorry to make your mouths water, but if you know anything about it, you can see that these here are 5 gold pieces." And he pulled out the money that Fire Eater had made him a present of. At the sympathetic ring of the... it's kind of faded away. The fox, with an involuntary movement, stretched out the paw that had seemed crippled, and the cat opened wide 2 eyes that looked like 2 green lanterns. It is true that she shut them again, and so quickly that Pinocchio observed nothing. "And now," asked the fox, "what are you going to do with all that money?" "First of all," answered the puppet, I intend to buy a new coat for my papa made of gold and silver and with diamond buttons, and then I will buy a spelling book for myself." "For yourself?" "Yes, indeed, for I wish to go to school to study in earnest." "Look at me," said the fox. "Through my foolish passion for study, I have lost a leg." "Look at me," said the cat. "Through my foolish passion for study, I have lost the sight of both my eyes." At that moment, a white blackbird that was perched on the hedge by the road began his usual song and said, "Pinocchio, don't listen to the advice of bad companions, and if you do, you will repent it." Poor blackbird, if only he had not spoken. The cat, with a great leap, sprang upon him, and without even giving him time to say, "Oh," ate him in a mouthful, feathers and all. Having eaten him and cleaned her mouth, she shut her eyes again and feigned blindness as before. "Poor blackbird," said Pinocchio to the cat, "why did you treat him so badly?" "I did it to give him a lesson. He will learn another time not to meddle in other people's conversation." They had gone almost halfway when the fox, halting suddenly, said to the puppet, "Would you like to double your money?" "In what way?" "Would you like to make out of your 5 miserable sovereigns 100, 1,000, 2,000?" "I should think so, but in what way?" "The way is easy enough. Instead of returning home, you must go with us." "And where do you wish to take me?" "To the land of the owls." Pinocchio reflected a moment, and then he said resolutely, "No, I will not go. I am already close to the house, and I will return home to my papa, who is waiting for me. Who can tell how often the poor old man must have sighed yesterday when I did not come back? I have indeed been a bad son, and the talking cricket was right when he said disobedient boys never come to any good in the world. I have found it to my cost, for many misfortunes have happened to me. Even yesterday in Fire Eater's house I ran the risk. Oh, it makes me shudder only to think of it." "Well then," said the fox, "you are quite decided to go home? Well then, and so much the worse for you." "So much the worse for you," repeated the cat. "Think well of it, Pinocchio, for you are giving a kick to fortune." "To fortune," repeated the cat. "Between today and tomorrow your 5 sovereigns would have become 2,000. 2,000, repeated the cat. "But how is it possible that they could have become so many?" asked Pinocchio, remaining with his mouth open from astonishment. "I will explain it to you at once," said the fox. You must know that in the land of the owls there is a sacred field called by everybody the Field of Miracles. In this field you must dig a little hole, and you put into it, we will say, 1 gold sovereign. You then cover up the hole with a little earth. You must water it with 2 pails of water from the fountain, then sprinkle it with 2 pinches of salt, and when night comes you can go quietly to bed. In the meanwhile, during the night, the gold piece will grow and flower, and in the morning when you get up and return to the field, what do you find? You find a beautiful tree laden with as many gold sovereigns as a fine ear of corn has grains in the month of June. So that, said Pinocchio, more and more bewildered, supposing I buried my 5 sovereigns in the field, how many should I find there the following morning? That is an exceedingly easy calculation, replied the fox, a calculation that you can make on the ends of your fingers. Put that every sovereign gives you an increase of 500. Multiply 500 by 5, and the following morning will find you with 2,500 shining gold pieces in your pocket. Oh, how delightful! Cried Pinocchio, dancing for joy. As soon as ever I have obtained these sovereigns, I will keep 2,000 for myself, and the other 500 I will make a present of to you two. A present to us? Cried the fox with indignation and appearing much offended. What are you dreaming of? What are you dreaming of? Repeated the cat. We do not work, said the fox, for dirty interest. We work solely to enrich others. Others, repeated the cat. What good people, thought Pinocchio to himself, and forgetting there and then his papa, the new coat, the spelling book, and all his good resolutions, he said to the fox and the cat, Let us be off at once. I will go with you. Chapter 13, The Inn of the Red Crawfish. They walked and walked and walked until at last toward evening they arrived dead tired at the Inn of the Red Crawfish. Let us stop here a little, said the fox, that we may have something to eat and rest ourselves for an hour or two. We will start again at midnight so as to arrive at the Field of Miracles by dawn tomorrow morning. Having gone into the inn, they all 3 sat down to table, but none of them had any appetite. The cat, who was suffering from indigestion and feeling seriously indisposed, could only eat 35 mullet with tomato sauce and 4 portions of tripe with Parmesan cheese. And because she thought the tripe was not seasoned enough, she asked 3 times for the butter and grated cheese. The fox would also willingly have picked a little, but as his doctor had ordered him a strict diet, he was forced to content himself simply with a hare dressed with a sweet and sour sauce and garnished lightly with fat chickens and early pullets. After the hare, he sent for a made dish of partridges, rabbits, frogs, lizards, and other delicacies. He could not touch anything else. He had such a disgust to food, he said, that he could put nothing to his lips. The one who ate the least was Pinocchio. He asked for some walnuts and a hunch of bread and left everything on his plate. The poor boy, whose thoughts were continually fixed on the Field of Miracles, had got in anticipation an indigestion of gold pieces. When they had supped, the fox said to the host, Give us 2 good rooms, one for Mr. Pinocchio and the other for me and my companion. We will snatch a little sleep before we leave. Remember, however, that at midnight we wish to be called to continue our journey. Yes, gentlemen, answered the host, and he winked at the fox and the cat as much as to say, I know what you are up to. We understand one another. No sooner had Pinocchio got into bed than he fell asleep at once and began to dream, and he dreamt that he was in the middle of a field, and the field was full of shrubs covered with clusters of gold sovereigns. And as they swung in the winds, they went zin, 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 almost as if they would say, Let who will come and take us. But when Pinocchio was at the most interesting moment, that is, just as he was stretching out his hand to pick handfuls of those beautiful gold pieces and to put them in his pocket, he was suddenly wakened by 3 violent blows on the door of his room. It was the host who had come to tell him that midnight had struck. Are my companions ready? Asked the puppet. Ready? Why, they left 2 hours ago. Why were they in such a hurry? Because the cat had received a message to say that her eldest kitten was ill with chilblains on his feet and was in danger of death. Did they pay for the supper? What are you thinking of? They are much too well educated to dream of offering such an insult to a gentleman like you. What a pity! It is an insult that they would have given me so much pleasure, said Pinocchio, scratching his head. He then asked, And where did my good friends say they would wait for me? At the Field of Miracles, tomorrow morning at daybreak. Pinocchio paid a sovereign for his supper and that of his companions, and then left. Outside, the inn was so pitch dark that he had almost to grope his way, for it was impossible to see a hand's breadth in front of him. In the adjacent country, not a leaf moved. Only some night birds, flying across the road from one hedge to the other, brushed Pinocchio's nose with their wings as they passed, which caused him so much terror that, springing back, he shouted, Who goes there? And the echo in the surrounding hills repeated in the distance, Who goes there? Who goes there? Who goes there? As he was walking along, he saw a little insect shining dimly on the trunk of a tree, like a nightlight in a lamp of transparent china. Who are you? Asked Pinocchio. I am the ghost of the talking cricket, answered the insect in a low voice, so weak and faint that it seemed to come from the other world. What do you want with me? Said the puppet. I want to give you some advice. Go back and take the 4 sovereigns that you have left to your poor father, who is weeping and in despair because you have never returned to him. By tomorrow my papa will be a gentleman, for these 4 sovereigns will have become 2,000. Don't trust, my boy, to those who promise to make you rich in a day. Usually they are either mad or rogues. Give ear to me and go back. On the contrary, I am determined to go on. The hour is late. I am determined to go on. The night is dark. I am determined to go on. The road is dangerous. I am determined to go on. Remember that boys who are bent on following their caprices and will have their own way, sooner or later repent it. Always the same stories. Good night, Cricket. Good night, Pinocchio, and may heaven preserve you from dangers and from assassins. No sooner had he said these words than the talking cricket vanished suddenly like a light that has been blown out, and the road became darker than ever. Chapter 14. Pinocchio, because he would not heed the good counsels of the talking cricket, falls amongst assassins. Really, said the puppet to himself as he resumed his journey, how unfortunate we poor boys are. Everybody scolds us, everybody admonishes us, everybody gives us good advice. To let them talk, they would all take it into their heads to be our fathers and our masters, all, even the talking cricket. See now, because I don't choose to listen to that tiresome cricket, who knows according to him how many misfortunes are to happen to me. I am even to meet with assassins. That is, however, little consequence, for I don't believe in assassins. I have never believed in them. For me, I think that assassins have been invented purposely by papas to frighten boys who want to go out at night. Besides, supposing I was to come across them here in the road, do you imagine they would frighten me? Not the least in the world. I should go to meet them and cry, Gentlemen assassins, what do you want with me? Remember that with me there is no joking. Therefore, go about your business and be quiet. At this speech, and said in a determined tone, those poor assassins, I think I see them, would run away like the wind. If, however, they were so badly educated as not to run away, why then I would run away myself, and there would be an end of it. But Pinocchio had not time to finish his reasoning, for at that moment he thought that he heard a slight rustle of leaves behind him. He turned to look and saw in the gloom 2 evil-looking black figures completely enveloped in charcoal sacks. They were running after him on tiptoe and making great leaps like 2 phantoms. Here they are in reality, he said to himself, and not knowing where to hide his gold pieces, he put them in his mouth precisely under his tongue. Then he tried to escape, but he had not gone a step when he felt himself seized by the arm and heard 2 horrid sepulchral voices saying to him, Your money or your life. Pinocchio, not being able to answer in words, owing to the money that was in his mouth, made 1,000 low bows and 1,000 pantomimes. He tried thus to make the 2 muffled figures, whose eyes were only visible through the holes in their sacks, understand that he was a poor puppet, and that he had not as much as a false farthing in his pocket. Come now, less nonsense, and out with the money, cried the 2 brigands threateningly. And the puppet made a gesture with his hands to signify, I have got none. Deliver up your money, or you are dead, said the tallest of the brigands. Dead, repeated the other. And after we have killed you, we will also kill your father. Also your father. No, 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 not my poor papa, cried Pinocchio in a despairing tone, and as he said it, the sovereigns clinked in his mouth. Ah, you rascal, then you have hidden your money under your tongue. Spit it out at once. But Pinocchio was obdurate. Ah, you pretend to be deaf, do you? Wait a moment, leave it to us to find a means to make you spit it out. And one of them seized the puppet by the end of his nose, and the other took him by the chin and began to pull them brutally, one up and the other down, to constrain him to open his mouth. But it was all to no purpose. Pinocchio's mouth seemed to be nailed and riveted together. Then the shorter assassin drew out an ugly knife and tried to force it between his lips like a lever or chisel. But Pinocchio, as quick as lightning, caught his hand with his teeth, and with one bite bit it clean off and spat it out. Imagine his astonishment when, instead of a hand, he perceived that he had spat a cat's paw on the ground. Encouraged by this first victory, he used his nails to such purpose that he succeeded in liberating himself from his assailants, and jumping the hedge by the roadside, he began to fly across the country. The assassins ran after him like 2 dogs chasing a hare, and the one who had lost a paw ran on one leg, and no one ever knew how he managed it. After a race of some miles, Pinocchio could do no more. Giving himself up for lost, he climbed the stem of a very high pine tree and seated himself in the topmost branches. The assassins attempted to climb after him, but when they had reached halfway up the stem, they slid down again and arrived on the ground with the skin grazed from their hands and knees. But they were not to be beaten by so little. Collecting a quantity of dry wood, they piled it beneath the pine and set fire to it. In less time than it takes to tell, the pine began to burn and to flame like a candle blown by the wind. Pinocchio, seeing that the flames were mounting higher every instant, and not wishing to end his life like a roasted pigeon, made a stupendous leap from the top of the tree and started afresh across the fields and vineyards. The assassins followed him and kept behind him without once giving in. The day began to break, and they were still pursuing him. Suddenly, Pinocchio found his way barred by a wide, deep ditch full of dirty water the color of coffee. What was he to do? 1, 2, 3, cried the puppet, and making a rush, he sprang to the other side. The assassins also jumped, but not having measured the distance properly, splash, splash! They fell into the very middle of the ditch. Pinocchio, who heard the plunge and the splashing of the water, shouted out, laughing and without stopping, "A fine bath to you, gentlemen assassins!" And he felt convinced that they were drowned, when turning to look he perceived that, on the contrary, they were both running after him, still enveloped in their sacks, with the water dripping from them as if they had been 2 hollow baskets. Chapter 15. The assassins pursue Pinocchio, and having overtaken him, hang him to a branch of the big oak. At this sight the puppet's courage failed him, and he was on the point of throwing himself on the ground and giving himself over for lost. Turning, however, his eyes in every direction, he saw at some distance, standing out amongst the dark green of the trees, a small house as white as snow. "If I only had breath to reach that house," he said to himself, "perhaps I should be saved." And without delaying an instant, he recommenced running for his life through the wood and the assassins after him. At last, after a desperate race of nearly 2 hours, he arrived quite breathless at the door of the house, and knocked. No one answered. He knocked again with great violence, for he heard the sound of steps approaching him, and the heavy panting of his persecutors. The same silence. Seeing that knocking was useless, he began in desperation to kick and pommel the door with all his might. The window then opened, and a beautiful child appeared at it. She had blue hair and a face as white as a waxen image. Her eyes were closed, and her hands were crossed on her breasts. Without moving her lips in the least, she said in a voice that seemed to come from the other world, "In this house there is no one. They are all dead." "Then at least open the door for me yourself," shouted Pinocchio, crying and imploring. "I am dead also." "Dead? Then what are you doing there at the window?" "I am waiting for the buyer to come to carry me away." Having said this, she immediately disappeared, and the window was closed again without the slightest noise. "Oh, beautiful child with blue hair," cried Pinocchio, "open the door for pity's sake. Have compassion on a poor boy pursued by assassins." But he could not finish the word, for he felt himself seized by the collar, and the same 2 horrible voices said to him threateningly, "You shall not escape from us again." The puppet, seeing death staring him in the face, was taken with such a violent fit of trembling that the joints of his wooden legs began to creak, and the sovereigns hidden under his tongue to clink. "Now then," demanded the assassins, "will you open your mouth, yes or no?" "Ah, no answer? Leave it to us this time. We will force you to open it." And drawing out 2 long, horrid knives as sharp as razors, clash! They attempted to stab him twice. But the puppet, luckily for him, was made of very hard wood. The knives therefore broke into 1,000 pieces, and the assassins were left with the handles in their hands, staring at each other. "I see what we must do," said one of them. "He must be hung. Let us hang him." "Let us hang him," repeated the other. Without loss of time, they tied his arms behind him, passed a running noose around his throat, and then hung him to the branch of a tree called the big oak. They then sat down on the grass and waited for his last struggle. But at the end of 3 hours, the puppet's eyes were still open, his mouth closed, and he was kicking more than ever. Losing patience, they turned to Pinocchio and said in a bantering tone, "Goodbye till tomorrow. Let us hope that when we return you will be polite enough to allow yourself to be found quite dead and with your mouth wide open." And they walked off. In the meantime, a tempestuous northerly wind began to blow and roar angrily, and it beat the poor puppet as he hung from side to side, making him swing violently like the clatter of a bell ringing for a wedding. And the swinging gave him atrocious spasms, and the running noose, becoming still tighter round his throat, took away his breath. Little by little, his eyes began to grow dim, but although he felt that death was near, he still continued to hope that some charitable person would come to his assistance before it was too late. But when, after waiting and waiting, he found that no one came, absolutely no one, then he remembered his poor father, and thinking he was dying, he stammered out, "Oh, Papa, Papa, if only you were here!" His breath failed him, and he could say no more. He shut his eyes, opened his mouth, stretched his legs, gave a long shudder, and hung stiff and insensible. We'll stop there and start next time with Chapter 16. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.